the cooler Apple stores.
Yeah. Welcome in, everybody. We're reminiscing about my evening last night, and thank you for joining the morning meeting. This is a platform for peace, love, and understanding. Whether you're watching on YouTube or here on Two-Way, we're grateful to have you with us, and we'd like you to participate in the chat with a presumption of grace towards all. Stay away from things that are negative. Be positive. Learn, even from people you disagree with. And if you're here on Two-Way and you'd like to be a part of the conversation, please raise your electronic hand. We love new people. So if you've never spoken before, today could be the day when you get to speak to Sean Spicer and Dan Turrentine, something only a few years ago little children dreamed of but couldn't imagine would ever become a reality. And now it's right here before you. All right, lots to get to. First, what the candidates are doing today. We're still seeing lighter schedules than I'm used to, with less than 3 weeks to go, fewer than 3 weeks. The vice president wakes up in Detroit. She doesn't leave Detroit till 12:25 p.m. Again, I'm sure she's having secret meetings and doing all sorts of things in private, but it doesn't appear she's doing anything public in Detroit. Seems like a good opportunity to take another bite at the Detroit apple, but maybe she'll do that without it being on her net schedule. She flies to Jersey and then drives to Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania, where at 3:40 p.m. she's doing a rally type event with 100 Republicans, including Adam Kinzinger, the former congressman, as well as two other former members, Republican members of Congress, who are supporting her, Barbara Comstock and David Trott. And then they describe as ex-Trump officials. So that's her big event. And then her really big event is the interview she tapes, I believe, after that event, that'll air at 6 o'clock Eastern time on the Fox News channel, where Bret Baier will conduct what will probably be the toughest interview she's done so far. Her first appearance on Fox, maybe her toughest interview of the entire campaign. We'll see how it goes, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Donald Trump's town hall airs, that he taped yesterday in Georgia, airs on the Fox News channel at 11 today. All female audience, no men allowed. Let's look at one of the clips they've released from that 101, please.
Son is a Georgia Bulldog. He was on campus the day Laken Riley was murdered. You know, terrifying for all those kids, right? I wanted to know, like, how quickly in a sanctuary city, like they're calling Athens, Georgia, how quickly can you remove those threats to our society so that our children can go out on a run, as they rightfully should be able to do, in a park in the daytime by themselves?
We can do things in terms of moving people out. We can move them out of the sanctuary cities. We're going to end all sanctuary cities in the United States, and we're going to go back to normalcy, and we're going to have law and order.
So we try to be forward-looking here. That was taped yesterday, airing today at 11. I talked last night on Two-Way Tonight about the Harris interview with Charlemagne the God and the Trump's interview with John Micklethwait. I think my sense of those is people saw in them what they wanted to see. If you like Trump, you thought he did well, and vice versa. 10 o'clock tonight, Trump's town hall with Univision airs, which I believe is being taped today in Atlanta, I think. I'm not sure exactly when. And Univision says the audience is made of Latino voters who qualify themselves as undecided. It's an interesting way to describe it. It suggests a certain laziness on their part. Like, if you want an audience of undecided voters, spend the money, hire a squadron of bookers, and get truly undecided voters. The Harris audience was filled with people, I don't know if they described themselves as undecided. There were a lot of Harris supporters there. Be interesting to see if Trump gets a lot of Trump supporters, or whether they're truly undecided, don't know. Tim Walz is in Potomac, Maryland, near where I grew up, where Congressman David Trone and June Trone and the Snells are hosting a reception for him at a time TBD. I don't know what else he's doing. J.D. Vance, Pennsylvania rally at 3 o'clock Eastern in Williamsport. It's home of the Little League World Series, right? Williamsport? Think so.
Yes.
And then 6 o'clock.
Williamsburg.
No, it's not Williamsburg. I guarantee it's not Williamsburg. I'm not sure it's Williamsport. And then in Wilmington,
that would be Williamsport.
Thank you. Wilmington, North Carolina, rally at 6 o'clock. Doors open at 3. Doug Emhoff is in New Jersey, I guess, raising money. Joe Biden is delivering the eulogy at Ethel Kennedy's memorial service at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle. I believe that President Clinton and President Obama and maybe Mrs. Obama are also there. And if you're writing a book about the campaign, that would be a good opportunity to create a scene, because I guarantee you they're going to be talking about Kamala Harris at that event. All right, guys, we're going to talk about the Brett Baer interview in a minute, but I want to ask you a few things. Sean, turnout in Georgia on the first day of early voting was massive. Most people I know say that's augurs well for the Democrats. What's your sense of it?
It's not good, but it's one day. So let's reconvene in 4 or 5 days and see where we are. But I wasn't thrilled with the number. I do think that's a good day for Democrats, and it should cause concern for Republicans in terms of early vote efforts. And so let's see how this paces. But the number was a good one. It's like posting a good fundraising number right out the gate.
Dan.
Yep, it's not only was it a good day, but when you're trying to reverse momentum on a macro level, things like this help. And Democrats, I think, as a rule, had become a little concerned about whether Georgia was drifting away. And this morning, people feel like, okay, we might have a chance there.
I'll say this: if I were a Democrat, I would say, see, guys, everybody stop wetting the bed about the polls. We got a turnout operation. So this is a good talking point for them today.
100%. And whatever.
And Sean, don't forget too, like they've had Doug Emhoff down there. They've had Walz, Bill Clinton, Kamala Harris. You know, there were some Democrats saying like, why do they keep going to Georgia when they've got problems in the blue wall? Yeah, to your point, this is like all, you know, remain calm, all may be well.
Yeah. And look, they've got it. People who say only the blue wall, I think, don't recognize A, her challenges in Pennsylvania, and B, the fact that there's only 7 battlegrounds, fewer than there've ever been. There's no reason not to try in those places. Whatever word means 2 notches short of giddy is how my Georgia Democrats reacted to this yesterday. They were super psyched, and I think you guys characterized it well. Now, there's a Politico story about disarray in the Pennsylvania Harris operation. And it quotes people on the record, which is one of the interesting things about it. It's not just anonymous sniping, including some senior union folks saying that the woman who's running the Harris campaign in Pennsylvania is from Pittsburgh. She doesn't get Philly. They have a litany of complaints. Now, in my experience, even if a campaign's run by Ken Melman or someone else super organized, David Plouffe, there's going to be this kind of tension between the locals and different constituency groups in either party. But the timing of that story and the fact that it's about Pennsylvania, the most critical state on the map, I wonder, Dan, if you're sitting in Wilmington today reading that story, and the campaign knew it was coming, they did everything they could to try to have people to tamp it down. But is that story just like an aberration, or is that potentially a real problem for the Harris campaign? And is it possibly an indication that some people think they're going to lose and they're trying to point fingers early?
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, this is not the type of story that you see from winning campaigns. When you're having problems, the finger pointing starts. We talked about last week what was happening in Wisconsin. The timing is not good. I mean, thankfully, there are, you know, within that story, some people saying like, I think we'll win the state in spite of these efforts, but there's obviously tension, and it's not the type of thing that you want to see less than 3 weeks out when you're trying to convince people to remain calm.
Sean.
Look, I think this is, again, one of those things where we're going to have to see if one of the things that's interesting to me is they're complaining about this woman from Pittsburgh. Allegheny County over-delivered last time. If you're a Democrat, you know, they actually have made some good moves in Western PA in terms of turnout and overperformance. I might be careful about they're complaining at this point, but it's hard to tell. Again, there are people who always have their egos hurt during a campaign because they're not getting loved enough or enough money.
I mean, with the right level of reporting and luck, a reporter could write that piece about probably all 7 campaigns and both campaigns in all 7 states, right? There are going to be tensions like that. But the on-the-record quotes were a little bit bracing, I thought.
Well, I think there's also tension because she's spending so much time in the western part of the state and in the rural parts of the state. You know, you could appropriately so trying to limit the margins of her defeat in those areas, which is smart. But I mean, I've heard this now for a couple of weeks. There is increasing anxiety about, you know, Philadelphia.
Well, but also remember that Biden has basically stopped at Philadelphia 3 times a week for the past 4 years. And there's a bit of, hey, we're not getting the love that we got.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. And she's from 3,000 miles away. She's not the familiar face. She's not Scranton Kamala. All right. NBC has a story on the web about how Michelle Obama has yet to campaign for Kamala Harris or even hold a fundraiser for her. It says, multiple sources say she eventually will. I keep hearing Nikki Haley's going to campaign with Trump. So let's put this in the positive. Assuming those things happen, how big a deal will it be if you see them out with the candidates or on their own?
I mean, Michelle Obama is the most popular figure in politics, almost, or even outside of politics. So it's great if every member of the team is out on the field.
Yeah, look, I think that I don't think there's a ton of first of all, I don't put a ton of stock into surrogates. They're kind of like VPs. I think they help. They're great to raise some money. They're good to get people out. But
you win a news cycle, register some people to vote.
Right. I mean, but that being said, I think Nikki's done a ton of interviews. She's been super helpful. I don't think seeing her side by side is going to make a difference, but I think it will for the media. So NBC News will be like, she finally appeared with him, and you'll get some earned media for that. I do think it's interesting, not so much for the campaign, because I revert to what I said a moment ago, but when you write your book, the Michelle Obama, Jill Biden, where were they? This is I get she doesn't want to say it, but why are they not saying it? We got to go out there and rally women. We got to really black women.
Well, Jill Biden campaigned extensively yesterday. She was like all over the place last couple of days. She did. You missed it, but she did. She was in like 4 battleground states.
One thing I'll say about Nikki Haley, though, is as Harris starts to rally around this message of Trump is a threat and chaos, trying to appeal directly to Haley voters. To come out and say, no. I am still all in for Trump and Trump.
I generally agree about surrogates, even the vice presidential candidates, but I think Nikki Haley campaigning with Trump would be a big deal because, Sean, you say she's been supportive. She's trashed him at least once on her podcast. Like she's not been supportive. And they told me a while ago they were going to campaign together. I'd be curious to see, like Pennsylvania, Philly suburbs, whatever. All right. The Brett Baer interview to me is massive. Now, it may be a nothing burger, but I doubt it. Brett's going to ask hard questions. She's obviously going to be super prepared. So, guys, we're going to do a little role play here. Each of you is playing Nikki Haley. Sean first. I'm going to ask you a question as if I'm Brett, and I want you to give your best answer.
I'm playing Nikki Haley?
I'm sorry, you're playing Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. I want you to give your best answer, not some parody answer like I love the middle class. Your best answer, Sean. All right, ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
Madam Vice President, tell us the story of Laken Riley and what you think it says about America.
Brett, we've had a broken border for decades under all administrations. And I'm the only one in this race that's prosecuted people who have come over this border illegally. And I'm going to fight hard to make sure that we prosecute people who are here illegally. And no parent should have to go through with what her parents went through. And no community should feel unsafe.
Bill Clinton said the other day, out campaigning for you, that the alleged killer had been properly handled and processed, this death wouldn't have happened. Is that judgment you agree with?
Well, as I said, this has been a problem that has plagued both parties for decades, which is why on day one, I will sign that bipartisan bill that conservative Senator Jim Lankford of Oklahoma put forward. It's me who will bring that bill back. I will sign it. I will add new border agents. No parent should have to go through this, which is why I will be the one to sign that bill.
I noticed finally, Madam Vice President, you did not use Laken Riley's name. President Trump talks about her quite a bit. Can you tell us the story of what happened on the day of her death?
Brett, I don't want to get into details or invoke a person, and it's obviously very personal for her and her family. But as I said, I'm going to make sure that there isn't another instance that occurs.
All right, Dan, how'd Sean do? By the way, I didn't tell Sean what the questions were going to be. He did excellent.
He did excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I don't normally read the chat, but I saw somebody say you were a little robotic, not enough emotion.
No, I mean
Okay, Dan, ready?
If she can be as cool, calm, and collected as Sean, it'll be a good interview.
Yeah. All right.
Please
folks,
don't give her any ideas.
Lots of hands up already, but if you'd like to be part of the conversation, particularly if you never have before, particularly if you live in a battleground state and you're undecided, please raise your hand, and we'd love to get you in just a moment after Dan gets his turn to play Vice President Harris. Dan, ready?
This will be the opposite of cool, calm, and collected. Yep.
All right, don't yell at me. Don't say, Brett, this is typical right-wing claptrap, which is why I've never appeared on this network before. All right, here we go. Madam Vice President, there's been a lot of focus on the apparent loss of mental acuity on President Biden. Could you tell us what you saw and whether anything you saw in public or in private with President Biden ever gave you pause about his capacity to do the job?
Brett, I think that every day Joe Biden and I worked closely together, and he had days where he was strong, and boy, I'm not even sure, Mark.
All right, Sean Pinchot, take over. Same question. Go ahead, Sean.
Brett, we've got to stay focused on the future. There's a ton of problems that Americans are facing. I'm committed to solving those problems, and I don't think we should be looking backwards. I think President Biden did the right thing by stepping aside. I was honored to have his support, step into this role, and receive the overwhelming support of the delegates at our convention. And right now, I'm trying to focus on the future.
Okay, I understand you're focused on the future, but this goes to some voters. This goes to questions about your credibility and your honesty with the American people.
Brett, I'm the only one that's put out my medical records. Donald Trump hasn't put out his medical records. So if you want to talk about fitness for office, I'd be glad to talk about it. But let's talk about the two candidates that are in the race.
No further questions, Your Honor. Rick, welcome in. This is why Sean has an extraordinary record of spinning. Rick, unmute yourself. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, what's on your mind, please.
Well, thank you for calling on me, Mark. Good morning from Scottsdale, Arizona. The last time you called on me, I positioned myself as, I guess the popular way of saying it is Kamala curious. After the debate, I felt like, I'd perhaps had enough of the former president, even though I voted for him in 2020. I did not vote for him in 2016. So I leaned in pretty hard to hear what Kamala had to say to a voter that was paying attention. My daughter and my son-in-law live in Brooklyn, New York, so I get a boatload of progressive values every holiday we get together, and I understand how progressive values work, but I wanted to hear something that said there was going to be some sense of moderation, or I don't know, some problem that was going to be solved in a bipartisan way. And I didn't hear it. What really bothered me the most was the days that she announced that she was going to break the filibuster to pass abortion legislation. And that's precisely the kind of thing that we can't live in this country where we have such a divisive issue solved in such a partisan way. It's what's divided the country to this point now, and it's got to stop at some point. And that's exactly if she had framed that whole proposition differently, I'd probably still be paying attention. So I'm here to say that I've actually made up my mind. Here's my ballot. From Arizona. It's early voting, and with all due respect to my brothers and sisters here on the two-way platform, we're going to vote for Kamala Harris. I've decided I'm voting for Donald Trump.
All right, Rick, thanks for sharing all that and explaining it. I was thinking just this morning, she's doing this event with Adam Kinzinger and others. It's very hard to be the unity candidate, even against someone as divisive as Donald Trump, if, as you point out, you're for eliminating the filibuster, right? That's very hard to square that. And I think that's a tension in her message that hasn't been commented on enough. Rick, what about the fact that President Trump danced for 30 minutes at a rally? No, forget that example. What about the fact that he's been saying things lately, like saying maybe use the military against civilians? Is that nothing he said lately has been countervailing enough for Kamala Harris?
Well, as we all know, as Sean has said a dozen times on these morning meetings, Donald Trump is going to say what Donald Trump says. That's just who he is. He talks that way occasionally. I got to tell you, I'm very fearful of what will happen in the country if he is reelected. You know, it's easy to see riots breaking out on the other side of the equation, because there's just such a hatred
Yeah.
for Donald
Rick,
Trump.
I'm gonna ask you one more, and then I'm gonna turn you over to Sean and Dan for questions, 'cause I'm sure they'll have them.
Okay.
Do you mind telling us in that sealed envelope who'd you vote for in the Senate race and why?
Well, I don't think I would could bring myself to vote for Ruben Gallego. He's just too progressive, just on the face of it, just going in. Now, Carrie Lake is clearly a flawed candidate, as a result of her, I guess, election denialism, having lived in the election in 2018 or excuse me, 2020 and 2022 in Arizona. I can tell you it wasn't smooth sailing for either
Yeah.
election.
Rick, you're the master of suspense. Who'd you vote for, dude?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's
I
all
didn't
right.
mean to
That's all right.
carry the lead here. I'll be voting
Yeah.
for Carrie Lake.
All right. Rick, I want to clarify one thing and then turn you over to Dan. There are people in the chat saying you're basically just a Republican. You were never really going to consider Harris. You were always going to vote for Trump. Just characterize yourself. How open were you to voting for Kamala Harris?
Well, I've been a Republican for most of my life, but not all of my life. So there have been times in my life where I have voted for other candidates.
Yeah, but you were truly open to voting for her.
I spent probably a week giving this
Yeah.
serious consideration.
Okay, Rick, thank you. Dan, question for Rick if you have one, if not Sean.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand this. So you found Harris to be too divisive? Is that in summary?
Well, I think she positioned herself. Listen, I'm a sucker for, peace, love, and understanding. And if I heard some peace, love, and understanding coming, in a tangible way, I would have been persuaded, that the whole, after the debate, the whole turn the page messaging and all the rest had me, really thinking hard about the way I'm going to vote. But I didn't hear that reinforced in a tangible way. And again,
so you thought basically then that the policies that she was proposing were not going to ever garner bipartisan support, and so it was too partisan? Is that kind of?
Well, no. I guess the policies are one thing. Getting them through Congress is a completely other thing.
Absolutely.
And breaking the filibuster. In Arizona, Kristen Sinema, through her political career on the ash heap to keep the filibuster, and that's the kind of political courage that if I'd seen some semblance of political courage out of Kamala Harris, I would still be thinking about it. But I saw just the opposite.
If Sinema was still running for the Senate, would you vote for her?
Yes.
Okay. The only thing I want to know is when do they pick up the mail?
Huh.
Rick,
but you think
I'm gonna drop it off at the post office.
Good.
You think then that Trump will be less divisive, will not try to end the filibuster, and will be able to get more things done with Democrats? Is that kind of in short?
That's a very good question.
Maybe
I
you
think
need to
that's a very good
that
question. I mean,
unseal that thing.
Listen, I can only go by what happened the last time. There was, a lot of very slim votes that took place, in 2017 over the tax reform. I still don't quite understand how the rules have to be 60 votes for certain laws, but then when you're spending money, you don't need 60 votes. That part of it, concerns me. I guess they did break the filibuster for the Supreme Court, but that was a precedent that Harry Reid decided to actually blow apart. Once these things, it's a slippery slope. And
Hey, Rick, let me ask you a question, okay?
So I'm sorry to be burying the lead
that's
each
all right.
and every time. I'm sort of
That's all right.
thinking in real time, and I will say, I don't know whether
Rick,
it'd be less divisive or not.
yeah. Okay. Rick, let me ask you this, right? You were an undecided voter. There's 3 weeks to go. Kamala Harris could wow you on Brett Baer tonight. I'm not criticizing you for casting your ballot, but given you're somewhat ambivalent, why not wait until the end? Because they're going to do stuff that may impact you.
Go, Rick, go. Just go. Go.
Well,
I don't mean because I'm trying to convince you not to vote for Trump. I'm just trying to understand the mind of the ambivalent voter. Or is it just because you want to cross it off your list?
yeah, if you can understand my mind, then please get in touch with me right away. But listen, ever since that filibuster question came up, or actually it wasn't a question, it was an announcement, and I started replaying in my mind how we're going to pack the Supreme Court. That was Joe Biden's latest idea, and all the rest of this stuff. And then came, the whole media tour and all the rest. And my concerns continued to grow that not only was her politics going to be divisive and very progressive, but also that she doesn't have Kristen Sinema's political courage. I mean, I think that was pretty clear.
All right, Rick, thank you. Enjoyed having you on. We still welcome you back, even though you've already voted, or you're about to. So thank you. Very much appreciate it. All right, Anish, come on in. I once did a live hit from the Stairmaster, so I'm very grateful to you for joining us. I know you're working out. You don't need to stop if you can do both.
No.
Well, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are and who you're supporting and what's on your mind, please.
Thank you, Mark. So my first vote was 2008 for Obama. I was back at Purdue in Indiana at the time. And as you guys know, 2008, Indiana went blue. It's been Trump ever since then. 2020, I was on the fence. Again, I was probably hooked to the idiot box, as they say. But then we live and we learn. So where I am right now, I mean, I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, but I vote in the state of Georgia. So as you know, Atlanta is changing rapidly because ever since COVID broke out, like Miami, like Austin, we're seeing a lot of people move out to the Southeast. And that's kind of changing voter demographics quite rapidly. And what we're seeing today, and it goes back to what Sean was talking about, is there is a lot of enthusiasm for voters on both sides, really on both sides. But that being said, part of my job is data analytics. And when I crunched the math of 2020 and extrapolated that for 2024, and this is where I kind of want you guys to chime in, it's looking like Georgia might slip away from Trump. He could very well carry Pennsylvania and Michigan from my math, but Georgia is kind of looking like 2020 to me. Just want to get your thoughts on that. And obviously you guys are way more experienced than I am, but that's something that I kind of want to highlight. Yeah.
Did you say who you were voting for?
Oh, Trump for sure. Yeah.
I thought you suggested that, but I wasn't sure you were following through. I'll start briefly, and then Sean, and then Dan. I mean, sure. There's reasons to believe, particularly after yesterday, that Georgia could be like it was in 20 in the Senate races as well. And as we all know, in southern states, if Democrats can up the contribution of the vote from black voters and win the normal share, they're unbeatable. And there's reasons to believe that a woman of color at the top of the ticket could do that. So I think she could win Georgia. I don't make her the favorite there, but I do think she could win. Sean.
Look, if you look at all of the recent polls, right, it's Trump up 5, tie, Trump 1, Trump 2, Harris 3, Trump 2, tie, Trump 1. I mean, there's everything suggests it's going to be razor thin. I think Trump has an edge. Yesterday, as I said, concerns me. It's one day, but we had someone in the chat just point out that, like, look, you had a good chunk of those early votes come from rural counties. The rural counties actually overperformed where they were. That is potentially a good sign for Republicans if they're actually going and getting out the vote. We obviously don't know. But I think you're right. Like, this realignment post-COVID is something that a lot of folks are talking about, both in North Carolina and in Georgia. I am concerned about it. We'll find out in a few days. The one nice thing for us is that when Trump agreed to play nice with Brian Kemp. Kemp is very popular. He's got a good machine. He's turning it out for Trump for, who cares, a myriad of reasons. But that is a very positive thing. So if they were still feuding, and Trump was still going after him, I would have a lot more heartburn about where Georgia is. But I don't think we're looking at a massive win in Georgia, but I think we edge it out.
Dan.
And
Yeah,
Sean, do you guys think North Carolina could give Trump a bigger lead than Georgia when everything is said and done?
Could. There are people in
Yeah,
Harris's
Georgia,
camp who think
North
so.
Carolina worries me because of the storm. And I've talked to a lot of folks in the last 10 days and I asked the same question. And there's two problems. I think that the municipalities and the state government are doing everything they can to help people vote, right? The problem is that where is that on your priority list if you're still having trouble getting basic necessities, your road isn't entirely cleared, you don't know where you're spending the night. It is a massive unknown factor. And when I asked Robert Cahaley how much fidelity we have in the polling, he said none, because it's a huge swath of voters that are traditionally for Trump that we just don't know now in terms of their ability to actually vote.
Dan, before you answer, I warn our affiliates we're going to run a little bit over. Dan.
Look, Democrats are more optimistic today than they were before. I think Georgia's an interesting state because in 2020, it's one of the states that Biden sent Harris to the most. She was down there quite a bit, and they kept telling people who would listen, watch out, watch out. Obviously, Stacey Abrams kind of showed a playbook a little bit. She personally came up short a few times. I think the question that Democrats have had is those kind of Bush suburban voters in suburban Atlanta who went for Biden in 20, would they go for Harris? And when Kemp and Trump were feuding, they were optimistic. When they started making up, they were not so sure. I think that's, it's the same thing with those suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, of Durham. So many people have come in. I know Democrats who think it's a higher probability they win Georgia or North Carolina than Pennsylvania. And I think these last couple of weeks, it'll be interesting to see where Walz, Emhoff are deployed. It'll tell you where they're feeling more confident.
Anish, thank you. Enjoy the workout. Enjoy Vegas. Put it all on
thank you, guys.
Put it all on black
Appreciate
meat
it.
or whatever that is. Thank you. All right. Anna, I'm pronouncing it correctly. Unmute, please. Can you unmute? Anna, can you unmute? Hello. One more time. She talking to me? She's talking to somebody else.
She's trying, I think. But...
Oh, there you go. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you for joining. Tell us where you are, who you're supporting, and ask or express.
I am calling in from Houston, Texas. I'm Cuban American. I was born and raised in Miami. So I have insight into what's going on in two areas. I have a question. Oh, who I'm voting for, sorry. 2016, I voted for Hillary. 2020, I voted for the Libertarian. And this go around, I'm not voting for either main candidate.
Yeah. Who are you voting for in the Senate race?
Neither.
Neither. Okay. Floor is yours. Question or comment? Thank you for joining.
I have a question. I'm trying to understand the logic behind campaigning. Sean, you'll appreciate this. This was on my neighbor's doorknob.
I can see that. I get the gist, I think.
So it's the Ted Cruz campaign, but what's interesting is they put it on my neighbor's doorknob, who is a staunch Republican that votes Republican all the way. Yet they didn't put it on my doorknob, and I haven't voted for Ted Cruz the last couple of times.
What's the I'm sorry, I can see it says Ted Cruz, but what's the message?
Pro Cruz. He's awesome.
Right.
Secure the border, grow Texas energy, create jobs and lower prices, keep families safe.
And does it say at the bottom it's paid for by the Cruz campaign?
Truth and Courage PAC.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the usual on the call-in side saying that he's up for open borders, reckless spending, higher prices, defunding the police.
All true.
But yeah, I'm curious as to when is it too much? They're spending a lot of money on TV ads down here for Colin Allred, and it's every commercial break. There's more than one commercial, either Colin Allred or the anti-abortion stuff. And it gets to the point where it's oversaturated. I find it extremely annoying, but I imagine other people do. So at what point is it working against you instead of for you?
Yeah, so it's a great question you're asking, because I mean, I was having this conversation. I've probably had this conversation 5 times with people about how many texts they're getting and whatever. Number one, on that personal side, if you wanted to stop, vote, because they will generally purge you from the list as soon as you cast that ballot. Here's the problem. One, it's a million groups that are out there, so that's Truth and Courage PAC, right? So you've got a bunch of groups out there. They all have money, and it all has to get spent. You don't want anything in your account November 6th. So they have to blow it, and they also have to raise it. And then I'll tell you on the cynical side, there's a lot of consultants that get a lot of cut from all that kind of stuff. And so there's a cynical piece to this, which isn't what's driving most of it. But at the end of the day, everybody gets their cut. So if you don't put an ad up, then the guys who are getting a percentage of the buy, as we call it, they don't get their percentage, right? So this is not about, you don't get any credit for having money in the bank on November 6th. So they're going to spend it all. And they need to tell their donors that they did that, because this is all, I need more money because I spent the money you gave me, and the money that you gave me, I put up on these ads, and here's what it's doing. And then I did a bunch of polling to show that it moved the needle. So it's an industry, just to be blunt.
I have one more question too. I've been getting a lot of texts on my phone from both campaigns, asking for donations, but it's interesting because none of them use my name. They say that they're from Georgia and other states, a couple from Texas, but they use names like Janet and Melissa or Michelle, dear whoever.
Well, somebody signed you
not
up.
Me. So I'm wondering if it's spam or if their roles are just incorrect, or I don't know.
Some of it too is that campaigns purchase voter or donor list, voter lists from other organizations. And to get a little technical, as spreadsheets get passed around, sometimes when they import them, names get mixed up and the lines don't all match up. As somebody whose first job in politics was merging thousands of spreadsheets, it definitely happens. But to Sean's point, it's you want to leave it all on the field. I've heard people say, like, if another person knocks on my door, I'm going to kill them. Like, just stop, doing this. And campaigns, some people think television is a diminishing return in general, but if it's not TV, they're going to get to you another way to Sean's point, until you vote.
Anna, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you for doing this, Mark. Really appreciate it.
We're great. Really appreciate having you be part of the community here. Dan, welcome in. That is a great American kitchen. I like everything about it. Tell everybody
great name too, of course.
where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Good morning. Dan from Houston, Texas, and I am definitely 100% voting for Donald J. Trump.
Did you vote for him in 16 or 20?
Both.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Tell us what's on your mind.
I was a black man on the Trump train way before it was popular to be a black man on the Trump train.
I know you've got more company this time.
Yes. People are waking up of all stripes, not just black people, but people of all stripes are waking up to the damage that the Democrats have done for a long time to various communities. And I'm glad to see more people coming aboard. And
Dan, what impresses you most about Vice President Harris?
Impresses me the most?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Absolutely nothing. I mean, I'm kind of like what she said on The View. I can't think of anything. It's just there's just nothing about it.
Yeah. All right. What's on your mind, Dan? You got a question, or just wanted to share what you shared, which is great. But if you got a question, now's the time.
Yeah, no, I really don't have a question. This is my first time on the Zoom with you guys. I've been watching for a couple of weeks, and I just wanted to share that there are a lot of not just young black men that are moving over, but also older black men that are voting for Trump as well.
Have you ever voted for a Democrat for president?
I did. The last one was Jimmy Carter.
Okay.
So I've been voting Republican since then.
And Dan, who are you voting for in the Senate race?
Ted Cruz.
Okay. You guys want to ask Dan any questions? Dan on Dan or Sean on Dan?
No, I just appreciate him sharing his voice. Thanks for joining us.
Dan, what's in that jar back there?
What's where?
Behind you on the counter. Is that a jar? What's in there?
Is a fake screen. It's not a real kitchen.
Oh, not a real kitchen. All right. I knew it was too good to be true. It's a great kitchen. All right. Dan, you want to ask Dan a question or just thank him for his service to America here?
Yeah, no, just thank you for coming on.
Okay. Dan, thank you for participating. Appreciate it. Have a great day. All right. Let's get one more folk in. If you've got your electronic hand up and you're a Harris supporter, please raise your hand. I'm sure we have some.
Fewer and fewer every day. We're winning him over.
Come on now. Yeah, there we go. James is here always to help us out. James,
Sounds
Harris
like you won
supporter.
40 years ago.
Harris supporter, leading Tokyoites for Harris.
Correct.
Yeah. James, what do you think? What do you think about? What do you think? Yes, sir.
Have an assertion, not a question.
Yes, sir. Assert away.
The whole premise of our conversation since we started has been that it is about defining Kamala Harris. And I've really started to believe it's really just as much about forgetting who Donald Trump is, because there's a lot of clever dodges that we use to discuss the truth about the man. And the one that comes up the most on this platform is January 6th. So what generally happens is somebody will say, what about Trump's speech and his behavior on that day? And the line, Sean, you do it better than anybody, no offense.
Thank you.
Comes down to personal responsibility. Trump gave a speech, and then a mob went to the Capitol. They caused a riot. What about all of the riots in wake of George Floyd? And that's a really good point. The problem is it evades all of the conduct that I find most egregious about January 6th. And the thing that gets us so worked up is that it's never discussed. So when I think about January 6th, my mind is Donald Trump was told repeatedly, time and time again, that he lost the election. He was told by the people who oversaw the election in the most important swing states that he lost. He was told by Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. And he said, listen, I don't care about that. Find me 11,780 votes. I heard the call. Okay. But I mean, you can say, characterize it how you want. Yeah. It was not just that. It was state election officials. It was state governors. It was legislators.
Hold on.
Let me just finish this one point because this is the part that's so unnerving. He then called up his acting attorney general and he said, I want you to declare the election was a fraud. And the guy refused and he tried to fire him. He approved a coordinated scheme to send fake election results from the swing states to Congress and then tried to pressure his existing vice president to throw out the legitimate results and certify the fake ones. Okay. So after all of that and going on TV every single day and saying that the election was fraudulent, then he gave a speech. Then he sent them off to the Capitol. Then we had a riot. And the whole result was people's lives were ruined. Millions of people lost faith in the election process. And Donald Trump, it all happened because one man refused to accept the results of the election. Sean, I'm sorry, but he was just told time and time again, read Jack Smith's indictment. Yeah. So that's why character matters. That's why temperament matters. That's why you can't just say, the guy's a lunatic, but I like his policies. You know, I know you got a black belt in whataboutism. There is no what about for this. And the next thing people say is that there are safeguards. The safeguards are only as good as the people who are in charge of enforcing them. There should have been safeguards for a lot of the stuff he did, but there weren't. And I think Donald Trump has very keen authoritarian instincts. He is someone who's not going to make the same mistake twice. He's not going to put people of integrity in positions of power. He's going to put woefully unqualified people in positions of great responsibility on the sole criteria that when the time comes, they'll be undyingly loyal to him.
Right.
So
James,
you know,
James,
sorry,
James,
go ahead.
no. Thank you very much. I'm going to say a few things. I know Sean and Dan want to also. I don't want this to turn into the 4-hour episode I joked about, but I'm very glad you said what you said. my knowledge of the facts suggests that you were mostly correct in what you said. Sean's going to disagree with that. I know he's making copious notes. Let me say a few things. There's some people in this country who are regulars on this platform who would like us to every day relitigate January 6th. And I say that not judgmentally. I just know there are people who feel like that is the most important thing, and we should be talking about it rather than nitpicking the tone of a Kamala Harris answer or whether she used an accent. I totally respect that point of view, and I know it's the view of tens of millions of people, so I fully respect it. What I don't like is people characterizing this platform as pro-Trump, because it's not. And people who say it's
I don't think
drifting,
it is.
I know you don't, but I'm speaking to other people now, both in the chat and who are contacting me regularly. This platform is not pro-Trump, and in fact, it's not pro-Trump in its intention, but it's also not in its audience. I've encouraged people who are pro-Harris to raise their hands more. I don't know why they're not. I know they're there because I know who a lot of the people on here are, and I have data about people because they've spoken before. Okay, so there are a lot of Harris people on here, and I'm glad they're listening, but they should be participating. I don't want to go the last 3 weeks where all the hands up are pro-Trump people. The undecided's deciding. No, James, I'm not addressing this to you. I'm addressing it to people. Reaction to what you said. If people think it's too pro-Trump, come on and speak and do what James did, which was, as well as anybody I've heard of late, explain why he thinks there's nothing that offsets what Donald Trump did on January 6th. And again, that's the view of tens of millions of people. And it's not an insane view. It's not a Trump derangement syndrome view. It's a very principled, thoughtful view of what they think Donald Trump did and the significance they attach to it, as opposed to Kamala Harris changing her accents, or even Twitter suppressing Hunter Biden's laptop, or even Kamala Harris refusing to take accountability for the border. That's a reasonable point of view. And the Trump people on here who are in the chat right now denouncing James, you just shouldn't do it. It's a reasonable point of view. And James, unlike some people on the left, including members of the committee, was mostly factually correct. And to the extent he wasn't 100%, I don't think his errors were dispositive or disqualifying in terms of the point of view he's suggesting. If Trump wins, and today I think he's the favorite to win, if Trump wins, the people like James are going to have to come to terms with an America in which their fellow citizens chose someone who did things that James and his colleagues think are disqualifying. They're going to have to do that, and they need to be prepared to do that, because Trump might win. Okay? And if Trump wins, and you're one of the people in the chat complaining about James and accusing him of Trump derangement syndrome, you need to come to terms with, if Trump wins, it's going to be really narrow, and he may not have control of the House, and even if he does, there's going to be a filibuster in the Senate. You need to come to terms with your responsibility to reach out to people like James and understand how painful this is going to be for them if Trump wins. Okay? Sean.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say unfortunately, we don't have the time, both for all of you and for me, to go through. I think this is literally like a 4-hour conversation.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So I'll just, as I was making some points more than anything else, and they're in no particular order, but I would just say this. I have had my personal views on January 6th known for a while. As a guy who worked there for, I think it was 14 years, I took it very personally what happened up there. Okay. So I've worked there. I've lived there. I've spent more time in the Capitol than I care to count. So it was a very personal day. And if you ever want to go back and rewind the tape, what I said on air on that day, you're more than welcome to. It was not necessarily popular on my side, but I do not excuse the behavior of anybody who did what they did on that day. So just to be clear on that, the role of President Trump in particular is, without getting into it, I don't fully agree with. Could he have done more? Yeah, I do think so. And I've said that before. But I also believe that, again, if we want to go down a rabbit hole of who's caused more violence and being accountable to your words, we could spend the rest of the week on that topic. You want to look at things that happened. I'll just tell you, in the last 24 hours, the texts of Cassidy Hutchinson have come out from the January 6th committee, where you see what Liz Cheney did to subvert her ability with her attorney. I mean, I guess my point is, you want to talk about one side versus another, democracy and all this stuff. I can be here all day because it's been amazing.
Sean, respectfully, Sean, There's no comparison between the Liz Cheney text
Mark,
and what Donald Trump did. There's just not a comparison.
No, I didn't say there was a comparison, Mark, so don't put words in my mouth. Let me talk if you're going to let everyone else talk. I'm making my point. I said that there were several points that I wanted to make. I do believe, James, I don't agree, and I don't have the time to go point by point with your interpretation of the timeline of what he said or the people that you're holding up as some so-called, say. I don't think that Jack Smith is exactly an arbiter.
Well, let's keep. I'll just let me
James,
just.
I didn't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I will just say this. I think when you want to look at the election, and again, this is you had states that I think on our side changed their laws and the way that they conducted an election under the false guide of COVID, and no one said a damn thing on your side. I'm sorry. I think when we want to talk about democracy and subverting the rule of law and whatever, what happened last cycle, to me, was a travesty. And I think every one of our folks is called an election denier when we bring this up. When we talk about keeping people off the rolls, the DOJ sues them. You see that here in Virginia. I find it funny how you want to go after Donald Trump and you excuse the behavior of so many people on the other side that do things that we on my side find abhorrent. So there's my bullet points on those.
Okay.
I think you're an honest broker.
Yeah.
I do think you're an honest broker. The whataboutism, though, I'll let people decide whether it's a fair or false equivalence. But it's the first time in 248 years that a sitting president refused to oversee a peaceful transfer of power. And take a look around the world when that stops.
All right. I want to let Dan, hold on one second.
Dan,
let me just respond to two things Sean said. First of all, Sean, I agree with you about citing the special counsel. I think his behavior has been abominable, and it continues to be so. I would never cite him as a arbiter of the facts of this case. I just wouldn't. He's lost his. No, I don't want you to.
Can I interject and just note that all of the evidence is coming from testimony, not from Jack Smith himself, from people in Trump's orbit and Republicans. There were no Democrats in the rooms. That's
and on the issue. Okay, but on the issue of conflating, denying that, contending that the election was quote unquote stolen, conflating that with all of the irregularities, some COVID driven, that you cite, Sean. I like the way Tom Cotton does it. Tom Cotton makes a very strong case for the irregularities having unfairly influenced the election. But to conflate that with Trump's
Mark, hold on. I didn't use the word. Why are you saying the word stolen? Did I use that word? Why are you putting words in my mouth? When did I say that?
I'm not addressing it to you.
It's a false equivalence.
You did.
What about it?
You.
Mark,
I'm addressing it to Donald Trump.
You
all. I don't mean you. I mean you all. If the conversation is about January 6th and about Donald Trump's convincing tens of millions of people that the election was quote unquote stolen, suggesting it was stolen through irregularities that involved malfeasance rather than just your party being outfoxed, okay? That's a problem. And to even bring it up, I'm not a big believer, as James is, in accusing people of false equivalency, because there are equivalencies that maybe not 100%, but that are close. But this is the fundamental problem. The Democrats and Mark Zuckerberg and all sorts of people conspired to make it less likely that Trump would win and took advantage of COVID to change the rules in ways that were advantageous to the Democrats. That has nothing to do with January 6th. It has nothing to do with trying to influence electors. It has nothing to do with improper things that Donald Trump has done to create the impression that there was ballot stealing and things that were criminal, as opposed to just you guys were outfoxed. Dan.
Yeah, James, the good news here is this is where Kamala Harris is going. This appears to be where the closing, argument is going, which is, are we going to go back to all this chaos, right? That Trump is crazy, he's deranged, and this appears to be where they're going. And January 6th, I am certain you are going to hear more and more about this, and the voters will decide, right? I mean, I don't think she's going to go down without swinging this bat, basically, okay? So as a Democrat who also, I ran on the mall that morning, January 6th before sunrise. There were people in Kevlar vests with guns drinking Jim Beam walking down the mall. And I remember I came home and was like, whoa, this is not looking good for the day. But they're going to make this case. And I, as a Democrat, hope the country, majority 50.1, agrees with you. But I hear other people and understand that may not be the outcome. And on this show,
agree. Yeah.
And
I
look,
accept
on
that.
this show, to Mark's point, we respond to what voters, is on their mind. We hear voters say the economy, inflation, immigration, right? So we talk about that. The candidates talk about that. No, because that is what voters have said is of most importance to them. But this is a big issue, and Harris is going to lean into it. Hard.
I'm glad.
Yeah, and
I
we'll see what voters, decide.
I come on the platform because I see reasonable people on both sides. And to me, it's just what goes unsaid. So that's why I felt the need to say it. But to just one last thing I'd like to say, if anyone who is voting for Trump is curious or at all concerned about what I'm saying, I would ask you, do you believe in your heart of hearts that in 4 years, if he were to win, he's not going to put his thumb on the scales for J.D. Vance if it means giving him a pardon? Do you believe that he's suddenly gotten a newfound respect or appreciation for the rule of law or democracy? And finally, if you're at all nervous, I'd encourage you to read Sonia Sotomayor's dissent in the Trump immunity ruling, because that is terrifying. What has happened at the Supreme Court for executive powers, Sean, I've been a lawyer for 20 years. This one I know is terrifying. So just, I'm not saying this because I'm some partisan guy. I'm not that emotional about politics until Trump came around and until these events happened. That's when I've gotten most animated. That's when I've been most concerned. So that's all I want to say.
James, very grateful to you for phrasing it the way you did.
Can I make one question though, since you're a lawyer? Hold on.
The objection is in writing, and I don't care. There are still legitimate concerns over the integrity of our elections.
When they cast the ballot on an electronic voting machine, that there is no paper trail.
But constantly shifting vote tallies in Ohio have led to additional.
Oh, you're shaking your head now, James.
Because
Sean, concerns then. Where was your legal concerns then?
My concerns stem from the fact that the sitting president of the United States, did any of those people try to subvert the election? Did those people try to steal it?
They undermined confidence in the result through their use of their public platform and their credibility to say they had doubts about whether the election was fairly conducted and the results were legitimate.
So when the Democrats do it, it's okay. I just want to make sure we're clear on
no.
One side doesn't.
Look, there's one thing I want to make really clear here. Trump, in his behavior, let's go back to Brad Raffensperger. What does he do after he doesn't cave to him?
James,
he outs him publicly and vilifies him.
James,
so
the bottom line, James.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're giving a bill of particulars about a particular thing Donald Trump did. What Sean is pointing out is what's a problem with this? Because I don't think any of us think Trump's going to steal the election. What he's going to do is undermine confidence in the result. He's not going to steal it. We have institutions. We saw that in 20. We have institutions. So if the problem, which I think it is people using their platforms to undermine confidence in the legitimacy of the outcome, as Sean has pointed out here and many other Republicans have pointed out, this has been going on by Democrats since 2004.
And it makes a very big difference when it's coming from the Oval Office, is my point. No. It's a higher standard.
The Speaker of the House.
I'm sorry.
The Speaker of the House. You think there's a higher authority than Bernie Sanders? You have more thinking to do. Just kidding. Trying to add some.
Wait, hold on.
Yes,
Here's my
question.
It is
different if the president
one point that I want to make is that there's so many things. Where do you think that Donald Trump got the idea from? When he says something.
I know exactly. Oh, wait a minute. Donald Trump sat.
Now everybody's
He picked the craziest people in the room.
One thing,
Rudy Giuliani.
He
picked the craziest non-evidence in the room.
For one thing, we're a half an hour over. For another thing, I got to be on Smirkanish. No, I'm very glad you came on and said what you said. For another thing, I got to be on Smirkanish in 2 minutes, and Sean's got somewhere to be, and so does Dan. Very grateful for everybody who came on, including James. I'll say again, you Harris supporters who are on here every day, please raise your hands and participate. I'm very glad James did, but we want it to be even, and we don't want people to feel they can't be part of this. We call on people at random, and a lot of them happen to be Trump supporters, and lately they happen to be people who are undecided, who have decided to vote for Trump. That's reality, but it's not the whole reality of what this platform is or aspires to be. Tonight, special time, 7 Eastern, We're all going to watch the Kamala Harris interview. John Delavolpe, who's a pollster, who's a Democratic pollster. So come if you're a friendly voice, if you're James, because it'll be morning in Tokyo. 7 o'clock tonight. We'll have highlights from the interview. We'll break it down. We'll hear everybody's point of view about it. And then tomorrow, regular time, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sean, Dan, and I will be back for a delightful romp through peace, love, and understanding. Sean, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I just considered that an interactive conversation.
It's always
Getting everyone ready for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Have a great day. I'll see you again. Special time tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, to break down the Harris interview and everything else that occurred. Thank you, everybody.